Ladies and gentlemen, imagine walking into a room after months of absolute silence, and suddenly there they are, the narcissist from your past, looking at you as if examining a map they once believed they owned. And here is the truth they will never admit. They are not appearing because of love, remorse, or genuine concern. They are standing there because something in you has shifted, something they no longer hold power over. Your strength, your calmness, your restored light. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what happens the moment they see you again, and why that single encounter becomes a profound turning point in your life. A narcissist's return after a long stretch of quiet is almost never accidental. It might look sudden, like an unexpected message, an accidental run in, or a casual, "Hey, how have you been?" But beneath that moment lies a calculated response to something they sensed. Narcissists are hypersensitive to changes in power, attention, and emotional access. When you go silent, when your energy pulls back, when the connection that once revolved around them stops feeding their ego, they feel it like an internal alarm. Silence to a narcissist is not empty. It is threatening. It signals that control is slipping, that the dynamic they took for granted is shifting in ways they cannot predict. This is why their return is never spontaneous. They appear the moment they detect that you've stepped into a stronger version of yourself, one they can no longer influence effortlessly. Your absence forces them to face a truth they despise. They are no longer the center of your emotional universe. And for a narcissist, this is intolerable. Your silence removes the mirror they used to see themselves. Without that mirror, they start to feel invisible, irrelevant, and unimportant. They cannot endure that for long. So when they come back, it's not because they suddenly appreciate your worth. It's not because they finally understand your value or want to repair what they destroyed. They return because they sense you've gained clarity, calmness, and personal power, qualities that threaten the control they once had. They come back because your silence disrupted the emotional system they relied on, and now they need to know if they can still touch your emotions, still influence your reactions, still pull you into the old patterns. The irony is simple. It isn't your neediness that draws them in, it's your strength. They are pulled toward the glow of your healing, the firmness of your boundaries, the steadiness of your energy. It is your transformation that triggers their return. But here's the deeper truth. Their return is not proof of love. It's proof of their loss. It is their reaction to losing the control they believed they'd always have. A final attempt to reclaim relevance in a story that no longer places them at the center. Once you understand that their reappearance is driven by your power, not their devotion, everything becomes clear. Their return becomes confirmation that your silence is working, your growth is visible, and their influence over your life is fading. And when you finally recognize that your strength, not your weakness, is what summoned them, you begin to see something else entirely, the power of the silence that carried you here. Silence was never about withholding words. It was about choosing self-respect. It was the moment you stopped reacting to chaos and started listening to your own heart. The quiet you created wasn't empty. It was forming boundaries, building identity, restoring your inner world. And that silence is what shook them. Narcissists survive off emotional noise. Your explanations, your reactions, your arguments, your distress. That noise confirms their importance. When you stopped giving them that emotional soundtrack, they lost their grip. For the first time, they were left alone with themselves, and that is the one place they never want to be. Silence forces them into the mirror they've avoided their whole lives, and while your quiet unsettled them, it strengthened you. During those weeks or months apart, something inside you solidified, your thoughts became clearer, you began sensing the difference between affection and manipulation, between caring and control. Silence returned your intuition, the inner voice they once trained you to doubt. So when they reappear, it is because your silence fractured the pattern they depended on. They return to test whether that quiet was temporary or truly transformative. What they don't realize is that the silence reshaped you. It grounded you, it brought you back to yourself, and that is what terrifies them the most. And because your silence changed you, their next move becomes predictable. When they notice their absence no longer disturbs your peace, they try to disturb it with their presence. And they do it with their favorite weapon, charm. Charm is their easiest entry point, their most polished disguise, their quickest route back into a space they never deserved. So when they see you again, after all that quiet, they don't lead with sincerity or accountability. They lead with warmth, confidence, a familiar smile, soft enough to lower your guard and rehearsed enough to be dangerous. They rely on charm the way others rely on truth. They know their charisma once worked like gravity, and they pray it still will. You'll recognize it instantly. Their voice softens, their expression warms. They might compliment you in ways they never did when they actually had access to you. They may bring up a shared moment, a memory, a joke, anything to trigger your emotions before your logic steps in. But beneath that glow is panic. They're not trying to reconnect, they're trying to re-enter. They are checking if the older version of you, the one who mistook charm for care, still exists. They hope silence made you stronger but not wiser. But this time you see everything clearly. You recognize that their charm isn't kindness. It's strategy. It's a test. A gentle push at your boundaries to see if they still open. And the beauty is this. Your silence prepared you for exactly this moment. You can feel their charm without surrendering to it. You can hear the music without dancing. You can watch the performance without handing them the spotlight, because now you know charm is a costume, not a confession. And you no longer confuse the two, and when they sense their charm no longer pulls you in, something flickers across their face, a quick, tiny shift, so subtle you'd have missed it before, but now you notice it. In that second they realize you are not leaning in, you are not softening, you are simply observing, and the calculation begins. If charm doesn't open the door, what will? This leads to their next step, testing. When charm fails, they start searching for cracks in your armor. They test your boundaries the moment they stand in front of you. It happens quickly, almost elegantly. They'll mention a memory that once triggered emotion just to see if it still does. They'll bring up an old mistake, not to repair it, but to check whether shame still works. They'll reference a vulnerable moment, waiting to see if your voice shakes the way it used to. They may even disguise a small insult with a soft tone to see if you still shrink. These tests are not random. They are measurements, tiny emotional experiments to see if they still have access to your inner world. They want to know if they can still enter your heart without permission. But this time, you feel every test as it happens. You see the intention. You sense the manipulation. You recognize the push. And instead of reacting, you stay grounded, because now you know the game. They might offer a compliment wrapped in familiarity, hoping it triggers old attachment. If that fails, they reach for an old wound, gently touching it to see if it still opens. None of this is accidental. Narcissists have studied your emotional landscape like a blueprint, your softness, your hesitations, your fears. So when they see the glow of your growth, they start pressing emotional buttons, hoping one still works. But they aren't looking for connection, they're looking for control, and here is the twist your silence created. The buttons don't respond anymore. The wounds don't reopen, the guilt doesn't return, the past doesn't pull you backward. Their tests now reveal something they never expected. Your emotional strength, your clarity, your detachment. You feel the memory, but you don't move toward it. And that's the moment they sense the truth they feared. The old version of you is gone. The person standing in front of them cannot be manipulated with old tricks or old pain. Their power starts to crumble, and when every test fails, when nostalgia, guilt, pressure, and subtle insults all collapse, they feel something they never anticipated: fear. Not fear of you, but fear of the transformation they can no longer reverse. Because now we reach the truth they hide behind their polished smiles and practiced confidence. They fear the new you. It shows in small ways. A flash in their eyes when you don't react, a stiffening of their posture when your voice stays calm, a pause when they realize your emotions are no longer accessible. They're not just confused, they're intimidated. The new you doesn't operate from old wounds. You don't respond to their flattery or their emotional traps. Your decisions and your voice now come from a place they no longer control. They are staring at a healed version of you, someone whose confidence unsettles them, whose calmness shakes them, whose emotional independence destroys the old dynamic. Narcissists rely on predictable people, those whose hearts they can push and pull at will. But your growth rewrote your entire pattern. It's not just that you changed. It's that you became someone who no longer reacts to them at all, someone who doesn't chase approval, doesn't fear rejection, doesn't crave their praise. That terrifies them. The moment they see the new you is the moment they understand their influence is gone. Their grip is slipping. Their place in your life is no longer guaranteed. And nothing shakes a narcissist more than realizing they've been replaced, not by another person, but by your strength. And it's that fear, subtle but undeniable, that fuels their next move. Once they realize they can't predict you anymore, they reach for the last tactic they have left, your emotional reaction. This leads into the next truth. The moment their panic becomes visible, your detachment unravels them. To a narcissist, your emotional neutrality is not just unexpected, it is destabilizing. They expect tension, anger, longing, anything that proves you're still emotionally tied to them. But when you face them with steady calm, when your voice doesn't shake, when your gaze stays peaceful, they feel the ground shift under their feet. Detachment is the one thing they cannot manipulate because it gives them nothing to work with. They will try anything to provoke a spark. Maybe they'll attempt a deep conversation, hoping to pull you back into old emotional territory. Maybe they'll act wounded or confused, hoping guilt drags you in. Or they may switch to arrogance, pretending your peace doesn't matter. But underneath it all, their panic rises. Because no matter what they try, you remain still, a quiet door closing. Your detachment sends them the truth they fear. You no longer orbit their approval. You no longer dance to their emotional rhythm. You no longer wait for closure from someone incapable of giving it. Your calmness cuts off their oxygen supply. You stop feeding their ego with reactions, and the dynamic they once relied on begins to starve. In your silence, they lose their grip on your heart, and nothing terrifies them more. And as their panic grows, something becomes beautifully clear, not for them, but for you. This brings us to the next truth. You hold the power now, because all their tactics, charm, guilt, nostalgia, pressure crash against the reality that you are no longer playing the role they assigned you. You are no longer their emotional resource. You are no longer their stage. You are free, and in that freedom the power shifts entirely to your side. They might still try to reclaim what they think belongs to them. They might test limits, stir confusion, or pretend to be vulnerable. But now you see through all of it. You understand each attempt for what it is, a desperate grab for power they never deserved, and simply by recognizing it, you claim the power they can't challenge, the power to choose. The power to respond or not respond. The power to stay grounded in yourself. This power is quiet but undeniable. It's in your eyes, your voice, your stillness. It's the certainty that your value is no longer up for debate. It no longer depends on their approval or attention, and the more they reach, the more they reveal how much power you now hold simply by remaining yourself. The irony is sharp. They came back to see if they still had influence. And in doing so, they expose the truth. They don't. You have grown beyond the chaos, beyond the old version of you, beyond their ability to shape your emotions. The power has been sitting inside your silence all along. And when that power fully settles in you, the next truth emerges, the one that turns this moment into a defining chapter in your life. Your response can end the cycle, because now every word you choose, every silence you keep, every boundary you reinforce has meaning. You're not reacting out of old wounds, you're responding with intention. This intention breaks the patterns that once trapped you. The narcissist may still attempt to provoke, confuse, charm, or guilt you. But you are no longer hooked into their emotional current. You choose how to engage, or whether to engage at all. One calm sentence, one refusal to re-enter an argument, one quiet walk away can cut the invisible ties that once held you in place. This isn't about revenge or proving anything. It's about reclaiming your peace, your direction, your life. Your response becomes a statement: the past does not define your present, and it will not dictate your future. When you choose clarity over chaos, boundaries over guilt, self-respect over validation, the influence they once held dissolves. And in that moment, you feel a revelation. Freedom never depended on them changing. It depended on you reclaiming yourself. When you respond with calm awareness, the entire dynamic collapses. Charm loses power. Manipulation loses effect. Old wounds lose their grip, and then you realize something stunning. The cycle ends not when the narcissist understands what they did, but when you fully step into your own strength. When you stand firmly in your clarity, your healing, your autonomy, that power can never be taken back. And when you claim that power, the final truth emerges, the one that transforms their return into your triumph. This is your comeback story, because the return of a narcissist is never about them. It is a mirror reflecting the distance you've traveled, the strength you've built, and the life you reclaimed. Their presence no longer reminds you of old pain. It reminds you of your rise. When they show up hoping to shake your peace or reclaim something they believed was theirs, they accidentally reveal the truth: you have outgrown them. You have outgrown the old you, and the story now belongs entirely to you.